Imagine standing at the edge of a frozen river. The wind is below freezing. Every breath burns your lungs. The ice stretches across the water like solid ground. It looks safe. It looks permanent. But one wrong step could drop you into water cold enough to stop your muscles within minutes. Today, you might check a weather app or read an ice safety warning. Around 20,000 years ago, you had neither. Yet your ancestors crossed frozen rivers again and again. Entire families did it. Children did it. They carried tools, food, and babies across landscapes buried under snow and ice. Somehow, they survived journeys that seem almost impossible from the comfort of the modern world. The surprising part is that they rarely trusted the ice itself. For decades, archaeologists assumed Ice Age people simply walked across frozen rivers whenever winter arrived. The evidence tells a more complicated story. Some of the oldest migration routes in Eurasia follow river valleys instead of mountain ranges. Sites dating between 30,000 and 15,000 years ago appear again and again beside rivers that would have frozen every winter. These include discoveries along the Yana River in northern Siberia, where people lived nearly 32,000 years ago, far above the Arctic Circle. Those rivers were obstacles, but they were also highways. Once you understand why, you begin to see frozen rivers differently. And you begin to understand why your own brain still pays so much attention to moving water. In 2001, archaeologists working at the Yana rhinoceros horn site uncovered one of the northernmost Ice Age camps ever discovered. The site dates to around 32,000 years ago. Winter temperatures likely fell below -40 degrees Celsius. At first glance, it seems impossible that humans could survive there. But the excavation revealed thousands of carefully crafted stone tools, ivory weapons, animal bones, and evidence of repeated occupation. These people were not passing through. They knew the landscape, and knowing the landscape meant knowing its rivers. In northern climates, rivers constantly change. A river that looks completely frozen may hide fast-moving water beneath a thin layer of ice. Snow can also act like insulation, preventing thick ice from forming underneath. Modern measurements from Arctic rivers show that ice thickness can vary by more than 30 centimeters over surprisingly short distances. A difference of only a few steps can mean the difference between solid support and sudden collapse. Ice does not fail gradually. It often fails all at once. So how did prehistoric humans know where to walk? The answer probably wasn't strength. It was memory. Generation after generation, people returned to the same seasonal routes. Hunter-gatherers were experts at building mental maps. Long before writing existed, entire landscapes were stored inside human memory. Every bend in a river, every steep bank, every dangerous crossing, every safe shortcut. Anthropologists studying modern indigenous Arctic communities have found remarkably detailed oral knowledge of frozen waterways. Experienced travelers can recognize subtle differences in snow texture, wind patterns, and ice color that reveal what lies beneath. Those observations are rarely written down. They are taught. Some communities even distinguish dozens of different types of snow and ice using separate words because each behaves differently. Language itself became a survival tool. Our ancestors likely developed similar systems tens of thousands of years earlier. Without them, a single winter crossing could become fatal. But there was another problem. Even perfect knowledge could not predict everything. Rivers never freeze exactly the same way twice. A warm current, a hidden spring, a fallen tree beneath the surface. Any of these could weaken the ice overnight. That meant every crossing required constant testing, not blind confidence, careful skepticism. Many archaeologists believe early humans regularly carried long wooden poles while traveling across frozen terrain. Such poles served multiple purposes. They helped balance heavy loads. They tested the strength of ice ahead. And if someone broke through, they could spread their weight across the opening instead of sinking straight down. Modern wilderness survival instructors still teach nearly identical techniques. Not because they are ancient traditions, because physics has never changed. The wider your weight is distributed, the less pressure you place on fragile ice. The people of the Ice Age understood this without equations. They learned it through observation, sometimes through tragedy. Every dangerous landscape teaches its own lessons. Only the survivors get to pass them on. But here's where it gets stranger. Crossing frozen rivers was only one part of a much larger journey. Some prehistoric families weren't crossing a single river. They were crossing entire continents. Around 24,000 years ago, the northern edge of the world looked nothing like it does today. Sea levels were more than 120 meters lower than they are now because so much of Earth's water was locked inside massive ice sheets. Between modern Siberia and Alaska, an enormous stretch of land emerged. Today, we call it Beringia. It was not a narrow bridge. At its widest, it stretched nearly 1,500 kilometers from north to south. It contained grasslands, rivers, lakes, and herds of mammoths, bison, horses, and reindeer. For thousands of years, it was home, not simply a crossing. People living there faced one obstacle again and again: water. Fast currents continued beneath the surface. Spring meltwater could weaken ice in only a few hours. A route that had been safe yesterday could become deadly today. Archaeologists studying Upper Paleolithic camps have noticed something unusual. Sites often cluster near natural river bottlenecks. Places where rivers became narrower. Places where rocky banks forced water into predictable channels. These locations offered safer crossings because shallow water freezes more reliably than deep, fast-moving channels. You can still see this behavior today. Caribou, wolves, and musk oxen often choose nearly identical crossing points year after year. Humans learn to do the same, not by chance, by watching animals. In modern northern Canada, indigenous hunters have long observed that migrating caribou avoid dangerous ice long before people recognize the warning signs. Animals detect subtle vibrations, currents, and weaknesses that humans often miss. 20,000 years ago, your ancestors were paying close attention. A herd moving confidently across a frozen river was more than food. It was information. It revealed where the landscape could still be trusted. But copying animals was never enough, because humans carried something animals did not. Children. A 3-year-old cannot judge weak ice. An elderly grandparent cannot sprint away from danger. Every migration moved only as fast as its slowest member. This changes how you picture prehistoric travel. Popular films often show small groups racing across dramatic landscapes with spears in their hands. Real migrations were probably quieter, slower, far more deliberate. Evidence from sites like Bluefish Caves, where animal bones bearing possible human cut marks date back at least 24,000 years, suggests people occupied northern environments during some of the harshest phases of the Ice Age. Survival depended less on speed than on planning. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherers consistently find the same pattern. Groups pause frequently. They scout ahead. They return to help weaker members. Knowledge travels through the group instead of remaining with one leader. Crossing a frozen river was therefore a social event. Someone walked first. Someone watched from behind.